What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Die Hard MMA Podcast. I am the long shot savant. I am the prince of props. I am the hammer. They call me the dog catcher. I'm your host, as always, Clint, and it is a wonderful, amazing Monday to be chilling here with all of you, ready to talk UFC Vegas 33. We're coming off of the biggest weekend of the podcast's history, folks. We absolutely destroyed the card last week. Could not have asked for more. Hit a 60-1 parlay. Without the parlay, made freaking 10 units with just the straight picks. We got a couple lucky bounces, but I am just absolutely over the moon right now. We've set the bar, folks. 26 units in one single event. Absolutely bonkers how last week went. So I hope y'all are ready to go because your boy is in a good mood. And we have an absolutely massive card to go over for UFC Vegas 33. We're about to go dumpster diving. How's everybody doing? Dog MMA in the chat. First one up here. John, Grateful Dude, Muhammad, Boston, Leon, Nestang. We have got the whole crew rolling in here. Boston, Nick, MMA, Chris, Dobry, Sean Sullivan, Michael Lunday, Nigel Lee, Dan Goldstein, Uncle Weezy, Sean V. We've got SD Cruiser, Jacksonville Zoe in the house. Everybody pouring in here. Here we go. Early Sports Bets. What's up, buddy? Blake Webston. Let's see here. Who else we got? Plague Runner, Hype 3 MMA, or just Hype MMA. The 3 always gets me in your name, damn it. Gaming Wolf 87. And Derek Stover, that's a new one. I don't know that one. All right, we got some new people in the house as well. Greg G, Preston in the house, Justin T, Dreamseek. All right, the chat is flying by. I am sorry if I missed your name in the call-outs there, but there's enough people jumping in early that I lost you in the flood. We've got 78 live viewers already, and we don't want to waste a single moment. Recap of last week. We destroyed it. Let's move on. I will welcome in my esteemed guest, one of my absolute favorite hosts, and apparently my twinsy, James Lynch, on the show today. How you doing, buddy?
Doing well. I had no idea you were in blue today, man. This was not coordinated. I just got this shirt, this awesome Street Fighter shirt, so I had to wear it today, right? So,
dude, I love the Street Fighter shirt. Don't even sweat it. That's an incredible find, and I am a little bit of a superstitious gambler. Most gamblers are. And I reward myself with the emergency Die Hard stimulus check shirt after every single big win. I rock the blue. So, you know, if I'm coming off a losing weekend, expect me to be in black. But if I'm coming off a win, I'm rocking the blue.
Makes sense. Got to ride the wave, man. And hey, congrats. I was hearing all the units. I was following along on Saturday with your bets and everything. So good to see everything worked out. And even remember me DMing you last week about the stupid foot injury and all that stuff. Like, people, man, they got too much time on their hands, right?
People have way too much time on their hands, James. And speaking of people having too much time on their hands, chat, I just want to warn you ahead of time. There's already been some shenanigans today. Apparently, I steal picks, James. I have been taking other people's picks and bets and posting them as my own, and that's the new thing that's going around now. So just heads up, chat. If anybody jumps in and is being spicy, it just, oh my God. Okay, so here's the thing. Let me just lay this out for anybody.
Sure.
If you at all are concerned about me not being genuine, which if you listen to this show, you probably should know otherwise, but if you're new, my schedule goes as follows. Saturday, I'm doing fireball shots, and I'm either live with Pub Sports Radio or I'm throwing darts with my father-in-law while I'm drinking my face off. First thing Sunday morning, I listen to church. We turn in virtually the rest of the day. If it's football season or hockey season, I've got that on in the background, but I am cramming, studying for this exact show on Monday night so I can give you all the very best reads I possibly can. Monday night, I'm here on the show. Tuesday night, I have a wonderful little event called Mandate Monday. It's the one night a week where I hang out with my boys, and it's that because it's, first off, a mandate. Secondly, it is mandated. My wife doesn't get to tell me no. So we play video games and shit on Tuesday nights. That's what I do. Wednesday, Thursday, I am hanging out with my daughter and my wife because I do have a family. Friday is the weigh-in, and I'm making content once again for everybody. And then Saturday, once again, we're on fights. So I listen to the few people I interact with on Twitter. Lock of the Night, Dan from Half the Battle, the Pub Sports Radio crew, everybody here, Lucrative MMA, Luke, James, yourself. I mean, basically the people I bring on the show, that's my internet circle. And every once in a while, I like to tune in for like Z's MMA live streams and stuff. I get some good information from them every once in a while, but I have always, absolutely always shouted out anybody who I've taken or tailed on a pick with. Y'all know that. So regardless, I don't have time, James. I don't have time to tail anybody. If you don't fit on the Dogger Pass podcast, shout out Cody Saftik and Paul Shaughnessy, the OGs. If you don't fall on Lock of the Night's Friday Roundtable, the Dogger Pass podcast, or Half the Battle with Dan Levy, I haven't heard your takes. So I apologize. I'm not trying to big time anybody or anything like that, but I'm a family man. I simply don't have time for the bullshit. So if you're trying to start drama online, you're barking off the wrong tree. I couldn't give less of a fuck if you want to accuse me of doing something, because the real ones know I'm not doing it. So I have been on my soapbox for too long, James. We've got an absolutely massive card coming up here, and we're going to break the whole thing down for you all top to bottom. So first and foremost, everybody, we got 120 live viewers. Thank you so much for being here. Smash the like button. Follow my boy James Lynch on already, if you on his Twitter, on his YouTube, everywhere. He's the best in the business if you haven't. But we've got some shit to talk about, man. First fight. I'm sorry. Go ahead, James. You were about to say something.
I wasn't going to say anything. I was just waiting for you to go ahead. I interrupted your lead there. Go ahead.
Sorry, just want to dive on into it. First fight of the night, we've got Ryan Benoit taking on Zarrukh Adashev. This is an interesting one, man. This is a rescheduled fight. They were supposed to fight a couple weeks ago, if I recall correctly. Benoit had an awful weight cut. He's a big dude at flyweight, cuts down a lot. He's 10-7. Adashev is 3-3. Kind of crazy. Both these guys nearly 500 fighters in the UFC here at this point. Ryan Benoit is a slight favorite. It looks like about -125. The comeback on Adashev is +110. And this is, man, I'm having a real tough time with this fight, James. It seems like an easy spot for Ryan Benoit, if I'm being honest. I feel like absolutely everybody is down on Benoit because he's on a bit of a rough skid. He's never really been overly impressive. But Zarrukh Adashev is a guy that's just so new to the MMA game. He's a kickboxer. He's a really good kickboxer, but he doesn't have the best ground game. He's still evolving there. He's still working on it. I think this kid could have been something if he had not gotten that short notice opportunity in the UFC. I just think he got here too early. Ryan Benoit's a guy that struggles with people who have good gas tanks and good wrestling. Someone like Tim Elliott, they're able to just chain grapple and keep him down, work him as he gets later in the fight, as he gasses out. I think he can flip the script here, though. He's big, he's strong, he's powerful. I actually believe he just got promoted to BJJ brown belt, so he's obviously been working on his ground game. I think this is a spot where Ryan Benoit might actually take a page out of the other people that have beat him and put Adashev on his back for the most of this fight and squeeze out a win. Talk to me about this one, James. Have you interviewed either of these guys? Do you know anything? What's good? Give me the news.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, just for your listeners, I mean, people who've seen me on here before, I always sort of give my tidbits. If I do interviews, I kind of get some insight. I did not have a chance to talk to either of these guys. There's a few fighters on the card I did get a chance to speak with, so I'll mention those little tidbits throughout. But I broke this fight down this morning on my podcast. This is a fight I would stay away from. I know the obvious choice, like you mentioned, is to take Benoit. I mean, you look at the experience, you look at who he's fought, but you also look at the fact that all of Ryan Benoit's wins, including Sergio Pettis, are no longer in the UFC anymore. So that's a bit concerning as well in terms of who he's fought, and just the fact that, the wins he has, is it that he's that good, or is it that he's fighting guys that aren't that good? Because he hasn't got a win in a very long time. The other thing that's a concern as well, as you mentioned the first fight, the weight cut. What's going to be different this time around for his weight cut? I mean, he's got to make weight. If he doesn't, if he has any issues, I mean, he could get cut here. I think it's an easy candidate. As much as they need flyweights in that division, that's something to consider as well. But I just look at the lack of activity here. I mean, that Pettis win was back in 2015. believe it or not, right? And since then, he just hasn't fought that much, and he's fighting a guy who just does not have a lot of experience. I've said this from the beginning. I don't know why this guy's in the UFC. I know he's short notice, but how often do you have a fighter that has a 500 record in just in the men's division? In the women, you see it a bit. So Jara Eubanks comes to mind. There's a few that are sort of, and Ashley Yoder, who we'll talk about later as well, but you just don't see that with such few fights. This is a guy that realistically should have been on the Contender Series before getting into the UFC, but he's going to have to learn on the job, similar to like a Chase Hooper, for example. So I want to pick Benoit. I am going to pick Benoit just based off what we've seen. And I sort of agree with you as well that he could potentially control the fight on the ground. But this screams past me, Clint. I mean, again, too many things going wrong here for Benoit. Weight cut issues, lack of activity, and just getting up there in age as well. And I just don't know what type of Ryan Benoit we're going to get. So I'm going to pick him, but I would stay far away from this fight personally.
I couldn't agree more, James. Absolutely couldn't agree more. I mean, this is one that I expect Benoit to get the win, especially, you know what, if he comes in looking good, if he makes weight and doesn't have any issues like he did the last time around, I think he's got the tools he needs to win this fight. This is also a southpaw versus orthodox matchup, and one thing that I always hammer home with Ryan Benoit, all of his offense comes from the left-hand side. He's got a big left, he's got a big body kick, and that comes from his left leg as well. Every time he's got a knockout, it's always with the left side. So when you've got southpaw versus orthodox, it's power side versus power side. So that will be available to him here in this spot. So I could see Ryan Benoit knocking out Zarrukh Adashev. I could see him out grappling Zarrukh Adashev, but Zarrukh could be making improvements, and we just haven't had the opportunity to see them yet. So absolute stay away fight for me from the get-go. I'm sure if I do like the parlay every single fight on the card sprinkle thing, I'll put Ryan Benoit in that, but I'm not expecting to invest too heavily in this particular fight to start the night. Shout out to James Burnett for the donation. Thank you very much, my friend. Happy to hear you got there on TJ. And yeah, thanks to the juice box. Everyone, that was so funny, man. Everybody was talking about the EPO being a thing and he can't win without it and this and that, the other. And man, he only popped for EPO once. So if he was on anything, he was on his usual stuff for Saturday. So guess we'll never know. Next fight up, James, we have got Philip Rowe taking on Orion Cosce, and this is a really fun fight. So a lot of people, myself included, were extremely impressed with the Cosce brothers when they made their debut on Dana White's Contender Series. Both of them looked like absolute monsters when they jumped on the scene in the first place. Really impressed, and I honestly thought that the other Cosce was the good Cosce. Orion seems to be the one who's not quite as physically gifted. He kind of wins more by decision, really close finds, really close fights, you know, kind of more grinding style. His brother was just getting everybody out of there in the first round. He seems faster, more explosive. So right off the bat there, I've got a little PTSD from parlaying his brother last time out and having him lose as like a minus 300 favorite. Orion comes in as a minus 200 here over Philip Rowe. And I couldn't disagree with that line more, man. If you go in and you watch Philip Rowe's fights, this guy is huge for the division. Absolutely massive. He's tall, he's long, high volume, likes to play the outside, manages range extremely well. He's got big head kicks, and he flows on the ground. This is a guy who trains over at Fusion XL with guys like Rodolfo Vieira, with Glover Teixeira, with Gerald Mearshart. Like, he has got some excellent training partners, and his ground game is extremely underrated. Orion Cosce is a guy who relies on that farm strength. He relies on that wrestling to just, you know, overpower his opponent, but he gives up takedowns. We've seen him get taken down multiple times, even though he's supposed to be the wrestler. And in scrambles, we've seen him give up bad positions. We've seen him make mistakes. Someone like Philip Rowe is going to be able to make Cosce pay for those on the mat. And then when we're on the feet, I don't know if Cosce is going to be able to close the range and touch Rowe. So he might be able to get in there and wing a big overhand bomb or something and put him away. But I don't know that he can get past the ridiculous 9-inch reach advantage of Philip Rowe. I took the dog, and I took the dog early here, James. The line has already moved a little bit. I think I got plus 165 on Philip Rowe. He's down to about plus 145 across the board here, and I don't think it's enough. I still think this is a dog or pass situation personally. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, in terms of betting, dog and pass for sure. Right away, you look at the height and reach. That's a bit of a concern as well. And just the fact as well that Orion has not fought, outstanding competition leading into his UFC debut as well. Even on Contender Series, that's why he was an underdog against Matt Dixon, because if you look at the guys he's fought, 2-2, 18-43, fought one guy with a decent record who was 4-0. Outside of that, it's a lot of sort of mixed results there. So there's that sort of combined as well, but and the lack of fights on top of that. But I think the one thing as well that we got to realize is that Orion Cosce, if you remember, was supposed to make his debut against Niklas Dalby, had to pull out of that fight. Why? He had a serious back problem. I think that's something that people might have glanced over. He actually had to get some serious rehab and some, fixing that thing. And this is something apparently he's been dealing with his entire career. Watch my interview with Orion. It's on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/LynchOnSports under the UFC Vegas 232 playlist. And you'll see that, this was something that had been bothering him for a while, to the point of where he couldn't sleep at night. He was telling me that, like, leading up to the fight, he was still going to fight, but it was one of those things where they looked at his back and it was just bad news. So he's since corrected that. He's given himself a lot of time to sort of go through that. So I think there's a possibility we see an even better version of Orion going into this fight, because this is something he's dealt with his entire career. But you do have some concerns as well with the fact that you got a guy who's a lot bigger than he is, who, let's be honest, that Gabe Green fight was iffy, right? I mean, I thought Gabe Green did end up winning, but if you look at even going MMA decisions, 5 media members scored that fight for Philip Rowe in that one. So it was sort of a 50-50 matchup in that one.
It was close.
And to be honest, with the layoff he had coming in, I actually thought he looked pretty good here. So it'll be a little bit interesting to see how it goes down. I understand Orion being the favorite here. My only concern is this guy's never gone the distance in his career, right? It's always been by knockout. And Phil Rowe, last time I checked, has only been finished in his pro debut. So he's not a guy that can be easily put away. And, a guy like Gabe Green, for example, has knockout power. So I do wonder, if he can't get the early finish, how's he going to be if it goes 3 rounds? That's a question, right? So we'll have to see what happens here. I think overall, when it comes down to it, I am going to pick Orion in this fight, because I do think the punches will start to add up a little bit. I think he will be able to get on the inside. I just don't know if he's going to finish him. And if it goes to a judge's scorecard, that's where I get a little bit concerned here. And I could see the scenario you're pointing out, which is where he does have trouble getting on the inside. Rowe's able to use his height and reach very well, and he's able to sort of keep him on the outside and maybe squeeze a decision there. This is another fight, and you're going to hear me say this a few times tonight, where I am kind of staying away. But if I was to bet this fight, I think there's actually more value on the dog, like you mentioned. But I am going to be picking Orion Cosce in this fight, just because I do think those power punches will add up a little bit in the fight, and he'll be able to get on the inside. So That's where I'm going with this one.
Okay, I like it. Fair enough. So slight disagreement here from me and James. We agree that the value is on the dog. I'm saying Rowe's going to win this thing outright. Lynch is saying that he does think Cosce gets this one done. Totally possible. I absolutely could see it. But, man, I always got to stick with my value. If I see value, I take that shot. And every once in a while, the judges bless you with a split decision like they did with TJ last weekend. All right. Next fight up, we have got Ronnie Lawrence taking on Trevin Jones. And this is a fun one, man. This is one that I am excited for. I've been looking forward to talking about this one. Ronnie Lawrence is 7-1. There's all this talk about Dana thinking this kid is special. They're expecting big things from him. And then we've got Trevin Jones, who's 13-6, a guy that's paid his dues, struggled his way to the UFC, got thrown in there against a monster on his debut, and now he's really blossoming, coming into his own, rounding out his skill set. Ronnie Lawrence has got nice footwork. He's athletic. He likes to attack that front low calf kick, plays the outside with his hands low and gets caught every once in a while because of it. But he's kind of a chain wrestler, man. He gets in there and he's constantly diving in on your legs, mixes that in well with the scrambles. Good timing. He averages so far in his short UFC career 10.86 takedowns per 15 minutes. That's ridiculous, James. I mean, just always diving in on the legs. However, Ronnie's gone dark. I do my Instagram stalking. Y'all know that. I have not seen, he hasn't posted anything since before his last fight. So we have no idea what he looks like, what's going on, what kind of shape he's in. We're not able to see anything here from a stalker perspective. Trevin Jones, this dude's got raw power. I'm this close to putting him in the death touch category, James. He puts people away hard when he hits. He's got really heavy leg kicks. He keeps his hands high. He moves well, sits down on his punches. He's got a strong body lock, and people don't realize he's a BJJ black belt. Like, everyone expects this guy to just be a power puncher. He's just a guy that comes out and wings bombs, because that's what we've seen the last couple times. People don't realize how good of a grappler he is because they just haven't had the opportunity to really see him show it off in the UFC. This is another dogger pass spot for me, James. I'm really frustrated with myself because when I saw this line open up, I almost blindly bet my guy Trevin Jones. He opened up at plus 170, plus 165 in most places. And I was like, nah, I got to do my research. I can't just blindly throw money out there. I got to do my research. I did my research and went, holy crap, this guy should never be plus 165 here. Went back to make the bet and he was plus 120. So I had to settle for plus 120. I missed out on punishing the bookie for setting a bad line, but I did go ahead and bet my guy because even at plus 120, I still think that at worst this should be a pick'em fight. Ronnie Lawrence has fought a low level of competition. He looked amazing in his last fight against Vince Cachero, who's 1-4 in his last 5. So, I mean, everyone's blowing up how good Lawrence looked, and he still hasn't fought anybody. We're still underrating Trevin Jones, man. He might not get the win on Saturday, but I absolutely think that he's got the well-rounded skill set that you'd need to beat somebody like Ronnie Lawrence. So I'm rocking with the dog again, James. How do you feel about this one? How do you see it playing out?
I'm glad you brought up the 50-50 thing because I do think it's interesting. And I did not have a chance to speak to Ronnie or Trevin before this fight, but I know last time talking to Ronnie, he was in Florida training at Sanford. So, and that's the first time he sort of talked about it where it's, the type of camp that's really sort of upped his game. He felt like he wasn't the big fish in a small pond, so to speak. He was there with other fighters. So I'm assuming he's there this camp. I'm kind of banking on that actually, because if he's there, I think we're going to see an even better version here. And I want to put something out there for a second here. You mentioned the Vince Cachero win, and Vince may be 1-4, but you look at some of the guys he's lost to, including Casey Kenny, not bad losses, right? He's fighting good guys overall. But you remember that Jamal Emmers fight. Jamal Emmers destroyed Vince Cachero. There's a close, short notice fight there, and Jamal wasn't able to put him away. What did Ronnie Lawrence do in his last fight? He did put him away. And I was super impressed by that because Vince, Hawaiian, really tough guy to put out. And here's Ronnie Lawrence going out there and taking care of business here. So I was very impressed by that. Now with Trevin Jones, weird career, right? Had that fight against Timur Valiev. That was a fight where, referee might have stopped it, with Valiev getting the win. Of course, he's able to come back. I know the fight's a no contest now, but realistically, that was a win for Trevin Jones because of there was marijuana, I think was what caused that fight to be a no contest. So I've been kind of up and down on Jones. Nice win over Mario Batista in his last fight, getting the knockout there. But you look at Ronnie Lawrence overall, this is a guy who's never been finished in his career. And I think the one loss he does have is to Steve Garcia. That was in Bellator. I think that fighter is no longer the fighter we're used to seeing. I think this is a guy that is just getting better every fight here. So what I think is going to happen is I think it stays standing. And I agree with you about the death touch thing, but I don't think that death touch is going to put out a Ronnie Lawrence. I think if anything with Ronnie's wrestling and just a combination of the striking, I think he does enough to impress the judges and get a decision win here. I don't know if he's going to, and he might even knock out Jones. You never know. Look at Valiev, was very close to doing it himself here. Ronnie Lawrence is the type of guy I could see going out there and doing that. So I'm on Team Lawrence here. I get where you're coming from, Clint. I do. Trust me, if it stays standing, could be very interesting. But I think just that mix of wrestling with Ronnie Lawrence as well could make things very interesting here. And I was even looking at Jones. I mean, in terms of wrestlers he's fought, I guess Valiev sort of fits that bill, but he didn't even really use a lot of that in the fight. So I think Ronnie Lawrence can go out there and take care of business and get it done here. I like him in this spot. Am I going to bet the fight? This is another one I think kind of just want, because again, this was also short notice for both guys too. So we'll have to see how that unfolds.
Okay. Another early disagreement from myself and James, but like I said, folks, we're going dumpster diving. There's a lot of questions on almost every single fight on this entire card, so I think we're going to see a lot of that, differing opinions, lots of hot takes on this entire card and all week. I totally respect that opinion, James. I see exactly what you're saying. Kid could do some serious damage. I like Ronnie Lawrence. I like what I see from him. I do. And I don't mean to besmirch his record or anything like that, but he's still got to prove it to me. You know what I mean? I'm one of those guys that if you give me a well-rounded guy, someone like, our boy Trevin Jones here, the shot that he took in that first fight that nearly put him away, that body shot was nasty, and his ability to dig deep through that and fight his way back into that thing and then knock the dude out that everybody was riding high on, like, that just speaks volumes to me. I love dogs that will fight for my money, and I know that you have to put Trevin Jones out or he's coming for the kill. Very much Nicco Price for me, and I'll back those kinds of fighters at plus money any day because I'm never going to be out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's going to be a fun one. I can't wait to see what happens on that one, no matter who ends up winning it. All right, real quick, everybody, I do have to shout out. Well, first I have to block somebody for everybody. Okay, keep it nice in the chat because the only things we don't allow are spamming and hate speech. So, like, you want to make fun of me, say I'm bald, I'm fat, okay, whatever, that's fine. But as soon as you start with the spamming, as soon as you start with the hate speech, you're out of here. So just, keep it civil, please. We appreciate it. I was going to shout out my sponsors, James. Goat Capital Sports. Make sure you check them out at GoatCapital _ over on Twitter. They give out a ton of picks. Every single day, they've got a pick package for all the major sports that are running, and they handle all the stuff that I personally can't help you with. They give you a money back guarantee. So if you sign up for their weekly pick package and they lose that week, you will get refunded for your picks that you purchased. So really not a lot that you can go wrong. Check out Goat Capital Sports. They are great guys. And I didn't mean to highlight that. I'm trying to block somebody out. So, all right, we're going to move on here. Someone trying to derail the show. It's funny because you can make as many, spam bot things as you want to. The best part is it takes me one single click to make you disappear. So you're going to run out of bots in a second, and my finger doesn't get tired. So
I'll tell you a new strategy I just discovered as well. There's an option now where people can only submit questions if they're subscribed to the channel. So usually that's an extra step that people have to take. I turned that on this morning. I had an issue a couple of weeks ago with some trolls, and I just found out that that's the way to do it. But yeah, just something to keep in mind. Hate to blow the secret there, but that's something that helps too. So just throwing it up there.
I got you. Hey, locker room. Are you saying you want to come in and steer this thing in case we need to block people? Because if so, you got it, buddy.
Suspense is killing us.
Everyone just sit tight one sec. I'm gonna send my guy MMA Locker Room an invite so he can get in here. All right. So while I'm doing this, the next fight up is going to be Jinh Frey taking on Ashley Yoder. Another really fun fight here. We've got two women who, again, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel here, James. I like Jinh Frey. I like Ashley Yoder, but they're both kind of having tough times here in the UFC. We've got a spot where Jinh Frey was really counted out against pretty much anybody, and then she bounces back, saves her UFC career, saves her job, and stays in this thing. And Ashley Yoder, 8-7, literally a 500 fighter here in the UFC, but she's fought everybody. She's been around absolutely forever. You cannot doubt the toughness. You cannot doubt what she's capable of, because she's shown us time and time again that she's literally 500. She fights here with all of these high-level mixed martial artists. So Jinh Frey made the move to Fortis MMA her last time out. That move paid off. She looked fantastic in her last fight. She's a grinder, grappling heavy offense. She absolutely embraces that physicality. That's something that she has over almost anybody she gets in the cage with. And Ashley Yoder on the flip side of this thing, she's tall, she's long, she's rangy. She's a BJJ brown belt, unless I'm mistaken. She does have a nice long jab. She doubles up on the jab. And that's something that I really like to see from fighters when they're active with a front jab, something like that, keeps people at range, keeps them where they want them. And she does use that to high effect. However, when she gets into the grappling exchanges, James, she falls to her back. She absolutely accepts bottom position, and that's what I have a problem with here in this fight. I see a lot of love for Ashley Yoder. In fact, I'm seeing a lot of people almost touting her as a lock here because they expect her to be able to take out Jinh Frey in a very easy spot. But she takes bottom position and is more than willing to play off of her back. And that doesn't look good for the judges. We are in the UFC Apex, and we know that favors grapplers. So Jinh Frey is going to be able to close the distance. She'll be able to push her up against the cage. They'll get into a scramble. I expect Jinh Frey probably to be the one who ends up on top. She, Ashley Yoder, that is, has never really been that much of an offensive wrestler herself. So I can see her making just a couple mistakes. We've seen her too high on the back, falling off and falling over, that kind of a thing. I'm not betting it, James. Let me tell you, first and foremost, I am not betting it. But Jinh Frey is the side that I would be looking at as the dog here, simply because of that grappling and strength advantage. How do you feel about this one?
I actually disagree. I don't know if she'll have the strength. She is very strong, but you're talking about Yoder as well, who's kind of big for the weight class. It's really tough to say if Frey would be able to outmuscle her. I don't know. That's my perspective on this as well. This is an absolute pass of a fight if I ever saw one. You have two fighters who, let's get real here, are kind of holding on for their jobs here. I mean, Frey would have been cut had she lost to Paula in her last fight. She ended up looking good in that one, like you mentioned. With Yoder, she looked terrible against Angela Hill. I mean, there's no other way to sugarcoat it. That was just a fight, and that was a rematch as well, so you'd think there'd be a better showing. All of Yoder's wins in the UFC are against fighters that are no longer in the UFC anymore. as well. So she's fought some good competition, but she also hasn't beat, a lot of impressive fighters as well that are sort of mainstays on the roster as well. The one thing I do like with Yoder that she's done over the last couple of years, she's been with a mental coach. She's been doing a lot of cross training. I know, for example, she was at San Diego Combat Academy training with Alina Lane McFarlane. She's done some work at CEA, the gym that Jessica Rose Clark trains at as well. So there's been a lot of cross training there. I know she spends a lot of time doing that because if you remember before, she was at Team Quest. She wasn't training with any women. And I think, it's good to train with guys as well, but it's also one of those things where, you got to train with like actual like women as well to sort of get a feel on that. So I think Yoder probably ends up winning a very close decision in this one, but I am not betting this. And I don't even think there's value on Frey as well, just with the fact that, again, she's so undersized here. Like we're talking about her being 5'3" with a 65-inch reach, taking on Yoder, who's 5'7" with a 69-inch reach. That's pretty significant. So I think Yoder can just keep her on the outside and make it so that, Frey's not going to be able to get in and hold her up against the cage. And I don't know if she'll be able to outmuscle her. We'll see. But this is a huge pass for me. But I would take Yoder by decision in this one.
Okay. All right. I think my guy Dan Goldstein nailed it here with the 1-800-GAMBLER. If you're betting on this particular fight, you've got a problem. And y'all know me, that still may end up being me. But I'm not betting this one, James. I completely see everything that you're saying, and that's these closely lined fights with less than elite competition. You just can never tell where it's going to go. You know what I mean? Ashley Yoder could snap her arm off in about 30 seconds and look like a monster. She could come out and jab her face off and keep it at range. And then Jinh Frey could close in, land some bombs because she wings big hooks, and she could win this thing by edging it out with power shots. She could end up getting the takedown or grind her up against the fence for 15 straight minutes. Like you literally have no idea what way this fight is going to go. So I'm going to say Jinh Frey surprises everybody and makes this fight more close than everybody expects it to be. But again, not betting it. Don't ride that one to the bank or say I picked it, so you should put your money on it, because no. Absolutely not. Shout out to my guy, MMA Lock of the Night. He let us know that apparently the Hopilov fight is off, which that makes me very, very sad. I was looking forward to breaking that one down. And y'all know, friend of the show, really loves Smiling Sam Alvey. He's a great guy. I'm honestly really surprised he got another opportunity in the UFC after the run that he's been on, but I'm extremely happy for him getting that opportunity. I hope they find him a short notice replacement, because if there's anybody who's paid his dues, it's Sam Alvey. And I mean, he dang near won that fight against Superman Span. He almost got him out of there in the third, probably deserved to draw that fight. And then they robbed him against Da Un Jung, and they gave him a draw that fight when he clearly won the dang thing. So out of anybody in the UFC, he's got a very questionable record because of some weird things that happened his last couple of fights. And I would love to see him just get one good fight. You know what I mean? Give the guy one good opportunity, and he kind of had that. So I'm bummed. Anyway, saves us from having to talk about one of these fights here. We can relax a little bit on the breakdowns.
Absolutely.
Next fight up here, we've got Danny Chavez taking on Kamaka. And in classic dog catcher fashion, I've already locked up Danny Chavez. He's a slight underdog. I've got plus 105 here in this spot. And man, this one's going to be fun. We've got 11-4 Danny Chavez, who's a little bit older for getting his career going, but I think he's still got plenty of gas in the tank, taking on Kamaka, a guy who's 8-4. Again, another one of these low experience, not quite there yet, working on it, evolving and growing in front of us type of fighters. Danny Chavez is training at MMA Masters with Colby Covington, which I don't think we can say enough of how much something like that will help him in this kind of a fight. He's really light on his feet. He strikes well moving backwards. Fast hands, good boxing, strong hips, and honestly, I know he got mauled in his last fight, but pretty dang good takedown defense. Like, he's kind of a Chuck Liddell where he uses that reverse wrestling to keep it standing and punch people in the face. Working with a guy like Colby, that's just going to be getting better for him. He's also a BJJ black belt, so when it does hit the mat, he is definitely not out of his element. He's got a good guillotine that he likes to defend with, and he's never been knocked out. He's classic, durable, Mexican warrior heritage type of fighter. Kamaka on the flip side of this thing, training at Extreme Couture with guys like Francis and Tavares. He's got a big right hand. He's another guy that moves well, strikes moving backwards very well, has big bombs. He invests in that low calf kick, which could be a problem. But he struggled with the jab of TJ in his last fight. He got rocked badly multiple times in his last fight against TJ. He's got a 2-inch reach advantage in this spot, does Kamaka, but he's also been knocked out twice. So of the two of these guys, I definitely question the durability of Kamaka. I like the experience edge for Danny Chavez, and I think this is going to be a bit of a brawl. And if these two go to war, I'm with Danny Chavez to be the one that ends up walking away, James. How do you see this fight playing out?
Hate to agree with you and bore our audience, but I like Danny Chavez in this fight as well. I did have a chance to speak to Danny. The interview never saw the light of day. I actually thought the outlet forgot to post it. Turns out I forgot to send it to them, and I always cleaned up my hard drive. But I do remember a lot of things from our interview, because initially he was supposed to be in the co-main event against Doo Ho Choi, if you remember. So they switched it up. Kamaka comes in on short notice. So again, Chavez was the one who knew he was going to be on this card, albeit in a co-main event against Doo Ho Choi. But still, I think that's a bit of an advantage there as well. One of the things, I'm glad you brought up Colby, because one of the things that Chavez noted in our interview is that one of the things he realized after that last loss to Jared Gordon is that he's been overtraining. He even had Colby Covington come up to him and say, look, man, you're doing too much here. Take a rest. If the supposed king of cardio is telling you to take a rest, you should probably take a rest. So that's one of the things that Chavez is really focused on. The other thing is that he never has taken supplements in his career. And I know when I heard that, I was kind of like, oh, let's hope USADA doesn't like come in here. But the fact that like it wasn't like a priority for him. So he's really, I guess the thing that I took away from the interview when I was speaking to him is that he's really been in touch with his body and trying to figure out why he's not performing at the level he's supposed to perform at. And so this is, diet's been cleaned up. He's been taking supplements. He's been getting the right amount of sleep. He's been not overtraining, right? So those are things he feels like we're going to see a much better version. And he talked about the Gordon fight. Let's not forget, Gordon missed weight in that fight. And Chavez noted in there, he's like, look, I took the fight because I had to take it, but you could feel the difference in there. And that's also why I think Gordon's now fighting at lightweight, because they're like, look, you're having issues making 145, so now you got to fight at 155. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is that Gordon did miss weight in that fight. Maybe the strength played a little bit of a difference here. But along with the experience, this guy loves to knock you out. And again, looking at Kamaka, we saw Jonathan Pierce knock him out. He's had fights that I think were winnable. The TJ Brown fight, I think he should have won that one. I think that's one that the judges should have given it to him. But nonetheless, it should never even get there with TJ Brown. Here's a guy that is, struggled in his own right. And I was really surprised that Kamaka wasn't able to finish him. So kind of what I'm getting at here, Clint, is I think this fight's going to stay standing. And I think Chavez is going to be the one who's going to get the better shots. He might even finish Kamaka in this fight, but I definitely like him as a dog here. And I definitely see some value on him. If you're going to bet this one at plus 104, maybe even take the knockout prop in this one too. If that gets you even more value in the fight as well, if you like him, because I don't think Chavez is going to try and get another decision and leave it in the hands of the judges there. So really like Chavez in the spot. He's going to be my first dog of the night.
I'm glad we see eye to eye on that one, James, especially because I did back this one with money. I am betting my guy Chavez here. And I love what you said. I do think he's going to knock him out. In fact, you all know I love my round 3 sprinkles. This is going to be one of them, because Kamaka has a tendency of slowing down and getting tired late in fights. I think that Chavez is going to wait for his moment, let it arrive naturally, and after they get into some grappling, some exchanges, I do think that knockout's going to come, and I think it's going to come later in the fight. But like you said, James, I don't think he wants to see a decision. I don't think he's going to want to risk losing this one on the judges' scorecard, so I kind of expect a knockout, and I'm going to love that round 3 spot. So I'm glad we agree here.
Yep, absolutely.
I do want to apologize. My guy Jose setting me straight. Chavez is Colombian. I apologize. I did put him in the Mexican warrior category. He's a Colombian warrior. So I apologize to all my Colombian friends out there. I did mix that up. You're absolutely correct. I appreciate you correcting me on that one, my guy. Next fight up, we have got Chris Gruetzemacher taking on Rafa Garcia, and no, Kyler Phillips is not fighting for the second week in a row. Chris Gruetzemacher, 14-4, taking on Rafa, who is 12-1. And apparently, James, all of my action is just going to be on this undercard this week. I'm just going to not even touch the main card. I'm just going to bet everything on the undercard and do it that way. Chris Gruetzemacher is a guy that, okay. So I was going to break down all the styles. I was going to give you kind of what he does and things you need to know. He's a striker. He likes to box. He's not great at grappling. When he gets taken down in the UFC, he loses. That's the short end of the stick. He came back off for a long, long layoff and got absolutely wrecked by Alexander Hernandez. And James, that was a bad knockout. That was not one of those little bink type of, the referee stepped in early and saved him. Like, his eyes rolled back. He is 36 years old, I believe, at this point. And I know that a lot of people are going to use that against me because TJ's 35 and I bet on him last week. There's a massive difference in the caliber of fighters that we're dealing with here. Chris Gruetzemacher is a guy who always had some decent skills, but never quite got there. TJ was a champion making his return here. So massive, massive difference between those two. And he looked awful coming back after this long layoff. He's always had a questionable chin. He only brawls because that's all he knows is standing in the pocket and swinging. And because of that, I think he's got the worst possible opponent for him standing in front of him in this fight, James. Rafa Garcia made a short notice debut against Nasrat Haqparast. Talk about jumping in feet first. Like, you can't get a tougher fight than coming in against Nasrat Haqparast for your UFC debut. He had trouble getting that fight to the ground because we all know Nasrat's takedown defense is legendary on points. So he had to stand with Nasrat. We all expected him to go out on his shield. This guy is made like Red Riot from My Hero Academia. He just hardens his skin, and you cannot crack him. He took the kitchen sink on the jaw and kept walking into Nasrat Haqparast. In fact, he rocked Nasrat a couple times himself. He returned fire and was in that fight the entire time. It was a 29-28, pretty clear for Nasrat, but the fact that Rafa was able to hang in there in the area that was not his discipline, that's a big deal. So we saw how incredible he looks on the feet. Folks, he's a grappler. That's not even where he's best in the fight game. So if he gets in there and he takes down this guy in Chris Gruetzemacher, who is old, who is shot, who struggles with grapplers historically, he's going to have a field day on the mat. And okay, so let's say Chris Gruetzemacher defends a takedown. I just saw this kid go toe-to-toe with Nasrat Haqparast. Chris Gruetzemacher just got knocked out viciously by Alexander Hernandez. I'd say they're ballpark about the same level, Hernandez and Nasrat Haqparast. Haqparast maybe even a slight edge because of the hand speed. So I would absolutely rock, paper, scissors, Rafa Garcia being a little bit better or at least able to hang with Chris Gruetzemacher on the feet, James. I think that Rafa wins this fight no matter where it takes place, and I honestly think he's going to run through Chris Gruetzemacher on Saturday. I have pulled out the big boy hammer, folks. He's minus 250, and I laid 5 units to win 2 straight on Rafa Garcia. I don't want to trust him. I don't want to trust anybody else to mess up my parlay. I don't want to have anything possibly get in the way. I'm not getting fancy taking him inside the distance. I'm just laying the bomb and saying, give me my 2 units because this kid is going to destroy Gruetzemacher. James, please don't tell me I'm wrong.
You're 100% right. I talked about this morning. This looks like a setup fight to me in the sense that you've got this guy, Rafa Garcia, who's from Mexico, by the way, who just became a champion, who's from Mexico, Brandon Moreno. You know they're going to go back there at some point. They want fighters like this on the roster that they can continue to build up. And you got Chris Gruetzemacher, who's barely fought. You know, that Hernandez fight was back in October. Prior to that, he fought April of 2018 against Joe Lozon. I was at that fight. That's how long ago it was. That was, you know, when I was back covering events like that. That's how long we're talking here. And just, you know, the performances overall have just been very lackluster. Like his best win, honestly, is Lozon, and that was a TKO retirement, if you remember. That was a fight where Lozon just took too much damage, and that's probably the best win that Gruetzemacher's going to have in his career. The other thing I found out today, Clint, I didn't know this, where's Rafa Garcia training for this camp? Talked to Brandon Royval earlier today. He's over there at Factory X. Who was the last opponent to defeat Chris Gruetzemacher? Alex Hernandez, who's also at Factory X. So that's got to be a bit of an advantage as well. And I like the camp switch up as well, training at elevation, getting some time in there. This is a tailor-made fight. I know you don't like the inside the distance prop, but I'm looking at some books. They have it at plus money. I think there's some value there in terms of if you want to play that a little bit. Yeah, I was looking there. If you look, I know Dimes, for example, has Garcia inside the distance at plus 175. So keep that in mind as well if you're really feeling good about that. But this looks like a setup fight. That they obviously don't want the 35-year-old who barely fights to get the win here. They want the guy who's, you know, an up-and-comer and 12-1 record. And I'm glad you brought up the short notice as well, because you look at that last fight with Nasrat, they're probably like, oh, well, he lost, you know, whatever. But this is also a guy who had a lot of success in Combate as well. Has a couple wins over some UFC vets in Humberto Banade and Estevan Payan, and also has a win over Eric Ghost Pepper Gonzalez, who was 10-3 at the time as well, too. So this guy has some good wins.
Sick name.
Yeah, and he's got some good wins on the regional scene is what I'm getting at. So, yeah, this is half all day for me. I think he takes care of business quite dominantly.
Okay, man, wow. So, okay, James, everybody, we've got 233 live people watching the show right now. There's only one book out there that has Garcia inside the distance. Please don't ruin it for the rest of us, because if they get hammered, the rest of the books are not going to be coming out at plus money. I had no idea, James, that the inside the distance was going to come out at plus money. I thought that it would be minus 125 or something like that for this kid inside the distance. I cannot believe they opened at plus 170. They deserve to be punished. And if I can get my hands on a line anywhere close to that, I will be playing more than my 5 units on the inside the distance, because that just makes no sense. And I love Ghost Pepper Gonzalez. That's a fantastic name. Whoever got that, just way to go, man. I have a question here, James, real quick, from my guy, Matt W. Always wondered when we say we have units on a fighter, what is a unit? And Matt, it's been a while since I've said this to the chat. There's no such thing as a stupid question. Lots of new people to betting, so I will explain it real quick for you. Everybody else, skip ahead 10 seconds if you're watching the replay, because you already know. So, Matt, a unit is basically your standard bet, right? Any whatever your number is, if you bet $10 per fight, that's your unit. If you bet $100 per fight, that's your unit. It's different for everybody. A unit is simply so we can measure against other bettors or other handicappers how well we're doing. So if you bet $10 and I bet $100 and I made $600 last night and you made $60 last night, people think I'm a big baller and people poo-poo your $60 win. In reality, it doesn't matter. You won 6 units and I won 6 units. We're on the same level, man. Like, it lets everybody know exactly what we're betting. Usually it's between 1% and 3% of your overall bankroll. You don't want to go too deep on anything so you don't overextend on any one bet or any one play. So just whatever your standard number bet is, that's your unit, and that's what we refer to it as. So there you go, my friend. All right. Moving the show along, we have got Collin Anglin taking on Melsik Baghdasaryan. That last name is hard to say, James. How do you say his last name?
I think you might have done the best job you can. I think it's Baghdasaryan.
Okay.
Try putting that on the back of a hockey jersey. That's all I got.
So, yeah, I'm like 1 out of 3 on the attempts there.
Yeah.
So we've got a spot where, James, I always try to fade fighters coming off the Dana White's Contender Series. They're always overhyped. They are flashy. They fight a low level of competition. And then they come to the UFC and they usually learn very abruptly that they're not quite there yet and they need a fight or two to get their feet wet. We have a double Dana White Contender Series fade situation here. Both these guys are coming off of their wins on Dana White's Contender Series. So it's a bit of a tough spot. You can't blindly take either side of it. Frustrates me a little bit. So Collin Anglin's going to have an experience edge. She's 8-1, taking on Melsik, who is 5-1. Anglin training out of Factory X with guys like Jonathan Martinez, Alexander Hernandez. So good gym, good training partners. This guy feints a lot. He explodes into range. He's kind of got a karate style on the feet, and he's strong in the clinch. He likes to rip the body with shots. I do love to see that. Kind of a high IQ striker and a grinder. He likes to mix in the grappling. He's strong on the mat, but he's fought an extremely low level of competition. That's something I actually tried to fade Collin Anglin on the Contender Series back when I was with odds.com and we did the Contender Series show, because I really wanted to get ahead of the fact that I just don't think this guy is quite there yet. Now, obviously, he may improve during the offseason, and he's going to just be slightly ahead of me and slightly ahead of the betting lines. But I'm not high on Collin Anglin. I'll just leave it at that. Melsik on the other side of this thing, he's extremely hard to tape, because before the UFC, he had 5 wins, and all of them were by first-round knockout. You can't really figure out what's going on with this guy because there's just not a lot to watch. He got a 15-minute fight in on the Contender Series, looked good doing it. He's basically insanely aggressive. He stays in your face constantly. He's got a hard deep kick, that front kick right up the middle that he likes to use, and he's got hard body shots, power knees that he targets with the body, really fast hands, and slicing elbows, James. It reminds me of the elbows that Matt Brown KO'd Diego Sanchez with, that big over-the-top come-down elbows, and he just breaks people. He puts them on their heels, pins them up against the fence, and then he flurries on them when they have nowhere to move. I just don't know what he really looks like outside the first round. I know we saw it in his last fight, but there's big questions about, again, the level of competition. So if someone like Collin Anglin, who can slow the pace down, who can grapple a little bit, if he's able to get this fight into round 2, I have no idea what it looks like. As of right now, Melsik is the favorite. I do think that he is deserving to be the favorite, just kind of based on what we've seen. He's a minus 150, plus 125 on Collin Anglin. I have a terrible run, awful run, betting Dana White Contender Series and betting Dana White Contender Series fighters in their debut. Everyone knows that, and I'm not trying to hide it. So I'm going to say, James, that Melsik wins this fight, but I don't know if I want to lay minus 150 on him. How do you see this one playing out?
People are going to get upset in the chat. I'm going to say the same thing I said with a couple other fights tonight. Stay away from this fight. There's too many intangibles here. Melsik, does he not train at Glendale with the Shabazians? Like, is he not? I'm pretty sure he does. And this is another case like Edmund where they fought a bunch of cans on the regional scene. You talk about Anglin. Listen to these opponents here for Melsik. 2-4 was his debut. Fought a guy who was making his pro debut in his second fight. Fought a guy who was 3-5. Fought a guy who was 0-0. Fought a guy who was 4-3. The guy he fought in Contender Series was 4-1. That's by far the best opponent he's fought. And that's where you get a little bit concerned here when you look at the records, because, you could say the same thing about Anglin, but at least with Anglin, he's got a few more fights and he's actually fought in LFA and a few other promotions that are a little bit more established here leading in. So that's where I get a little bit concerned here. Now, I should mention, did have a chance to speak to Anglin before this fight well in advance. I asked him why he was removed from that fight earlier, and he had an injury, and he said, look, like, it was one of those things where I wanted to fight against Sang-Woo Choi, but my coaches were like, no. And he really wanted to make sure when he came in for this debut, because he knows the importance of getting a win, that he sort of took a very patient approach to getting into the UFC. He didn't want to just jump in there and get his first fight. He wanted to make sure he was 100% good to go. So I know he's been dealing with some injuries. That's why we haven't seen him in there for a while. And he said that he's, A-okay now. Everything's good to go. So the only thing I do worry about is something you talk about there, which is the aggression from Melsik in this fight, where, I could see him taking Anglin out of his element and just going straight forward and maybe getting a quick finish here. I mean, the evidence shows that Anglin's a guy that is tough to finish. Even his one loss was the second pro fight. It was a decision loss, but you never know with these types of styles here. I kind of feel like this is going to be a situation like Shabazian, where you're going to have this opponent that's, potentially could come out and get a quick finish, but there is a point where you got to fade this guy. With Edmund, now we're starting to see it, right? Like, where he's had to go to a new camp because, we got to say it. Glendale Fight Club, it's where your careers go to die. It seems like Travis Brown. I mean, the list goes on with fighters who have just struggled under that coaching
Not
system.
enough head movement, James.
There's not enough head moves. There's not a lot of no people in the gym, right? It's a lot of yes people, So I think that's where we could run into this. I don't know if it'll be this fight. I'm going to take Melsik as the pick just because of the aggression, but I do want to warn people that this is not a slam dunk pick by any means. And I think Collin Anglin's the type of guy who could potentially surprise here. And I think if anything, if you were to bet this fight, I think the value's on Anglin, to be honest, because I just don't know enough about this opponent. It's great. It's one thing to knock out all your opponents. It's another thing when you're fighting guys that have no fights and have bad records. So just warn people out there in terms of that fight.
Okay. I appreciate the warning, James. Absolutely. And that's where, for me, man, I don't know if I'm going to get to it. I am absolutely picking Melsik, and I think you're totally right. He's going to peak at some point because there just aren't any bodies over there. The coaching staff, it's not that great. They do a good job of capitalizing on talent, but there's only so far they seem to be able to take anybody. Maybe this kid's the next wave. Maybe they've got it figured out and he'll go far. I don't know. But these are the types of opponents I think he can get through. So I do expect him to win on Saturday. But beyond that point, Melsik may have an MMA ceiling. Somebody is going to be able to take this kid down. Somebody is going to be able to survive that first round and make it a problem moving forward. But Saturday, I'm not high on Collin Anglin. I think he gets it done on Saturday against Collin Anglin, but I may end up just looking for like the under 2.5 or something like that. Because
that could be a good bet. Yeah.
Even if Melsik doesn't get the finish, you would kind of expect Anglin to have the grappling in his back pocket, and that be the thing he uses to kind of take over the fight. And we've seen it happen when you gas out, when you slow down, these guys get exposed on the mat. He could absolutely give up some kind of a rear naked choke or a bad position, something like that. And realistically, he probably gets it done in the first round. So I'm probably looking for violence on this bet if I'm going to bet anything.
That's a good call, actually, the under. Also, side note, Collin Anglin, huge hockey fan, big Detroit Red Wings fan. So if you ever need a reason to like Collin Anglin, that's it. I literally spent half the interview talking hockey about him, so it was great.
James, now you gave me a reason to like the guy.
I'm giving you conflicting feelings on this fight, so there you go.
But at least it's just the Red Wings, though. It's not anybody that I'm invested in, so I can just be like,
Yeah, it's all good. There you go.
All right, next fight up, we have got the ladies returning. Nicco Montaño taking on Yanan Mulan. Nicco Montaño is 5-3. Ridiculously, somehow she still doesn't even have 10 professional MMA fights. Yanan Wu is 11-4. And let me just go ahead and start this off with the disclaimer that, James, this fight may not happen. Nicco Montaño is the pull-out queen. Like she has pulled out of 5 fights in a row now. I am honestly shocked that the UFC even still has her on the roster. Because when you cannot make it to the scales, when you cannot make it to the big show, they tend to dump you off to the regional scene. They tend to let those people just sail on. And if they show that they can get, 2 good wins, make weight a couple times, get back on track, then they'll bring them back. But they managed to hang on to Nicco Montaño at this point. She was the Tough 26 winner and the first ever women's flyweight champion. She just recently moved over, I believe, to Syndicate MMA. So she's training with like Liana Jojua and Jojo Calderwood. Big fan here. So I like that move personally. She is actually a really damn good fighter, James, and that's kind of the problem. Nicco Montaño is one of those sad opportunities that she was just never able to capitalize on what she potentially could have been. I mean, she's still young, so maybe if she gets on track now and gets some fights together, she could string something together, get into contendership, that kind of thing. But she missed the prime years of her life, and we can't ignore that. She's very physically strong. Looking at her Instagram, it looks like she beefed up a little bit, actually, put some muscle on. Excellent underhooks. She likes to bully people up against the fence. She's got big power clinch knees, strong wrestling, and she floats on top position, James. If she gets you to the mat, she stays on top of you, and it is nasty what she can do to people when they are underneath her. And that's where I wish we could see more of her, because it's really fun to watch. Now, Mulan over here, she trains out of Tiger Muay Thai. She likes to mix in the takedowns, but realistically, in my opinion, she's not the greatest wrestler in the world. She's got decent grappling, but she ends up on the wrong side of scrambles. She always seems to give up position and end up on her back and end up playing from the bottom. On the feet, though, she's very light on her feet. She's got the good classic Tiger Muay Thai style, good side-to-side movement, plays on the outside, but she just doesn't have a lot of heat on her punches and her kicks. She's not much of a knockout threat. She's kind of more of a point fighter. She's got a 66% takedown defense rating, and she's even on her strike differential. So even though Yanan Wu is a decent striker, she's still getting hit just as often as she hits her opponent. She's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage in this spot. And if they make it, James, if they make it to the scale, if this one doesn't get canceled, I think Nicco Montaño is going to run through Yanan Wu. I mean, I think everyone's going to remember why she was the champ in the first place, because this will be utter domination on the floor. And I fully expect to take the TKO prop, because if she gets Wu on her back, the referee's pulling her off. She will maul this girl on the floor. Let me know if you know anything, James, if you'd interviewed anybody or if we have any insider info.
Nicco's actually a tough one to get a hold of. She even follows me on Instagram, and I still have had troubles like setting up an interview. I remember in the past, like there's certain fighters where it's like when you're trying to schedule an interview, sometimes they make you like they're just not good at getting back to you. She's one of them, so I didn't even bother for this card, because I'm like, I'll just get someone else that I can find it a lot easier to get a hold of. But you're right, she's part of the Synda Chicks, as they're calling themselves. There's a whole bunch of women that train over at Syndicate MMA, so she's part of that group. So a lot of good training there. That's definitely a plus. I'm with you. She's still a great fighter. Her last loss is to Juliana Pena, who's now fighting for the title, right? Like you mentioned. It's actually been 7 pullouts, I think, since her winning the Ultimate Fighter back in 2017. She got
1 in there, though. She had 2 pullouts, and then she got the loss to Pena, and then 5 in a row after that point.
She was supposed to fight McMahon, but that was a McMahon injury. That's right. So it wasn't her in that case. But still, some good wins on tough. Like Lauren Murphy, Montana Del Rosa, those are good wins. Like I know, obviously, times have changed since then, but that's one thing not to forget. With Wu, I don't even know if she trained at Tiger Muay Thai, because I spoke to a lot of fighters that wanted to train there and they can't because of the whole COVID situation. So I don't even know where she's trained this camp. I just peeped her Instagram, unless she has a new account. But I think the last post was back in 2019. So I don't even know if she's been over there. So that's
maybe I'm getting old info there then.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So no, but she does train there. I just don't know if she got to train there for this camp per se. I'm not entirely sure there. But I don't know if she'll finish. Nicco will finish. Wu in this case. I do expect her to win, but you look at Wu, all of her losses, at least recently in the UFC, have been by decision. Yana Kunitskaya knocked her out back in 2016, but Montaño typically does not finish a lot of her fights. So that makes me think that, maybe it does go the distance. And the fact that she hasn't fought in a while too, maybe she's not going to try and get too reckless here. Maybe she just she knows she's got to win here. So I don't know. I would lean more towards the decision here, but I do expect her to clearly, on paper, Montaño's a much better fighter. I expect her to win, but I don't know. The inactivity kind of worries me a bit. So that's why I think a decision might be better off in terms of betting this fight. So
I can absolutely understand that, James. I think what I'm kind of comparing it to here in my brain, at least, is look at what Miesha Tate did. Like, if Nicco Montaño gets to the cage, I fully expect her to want to put on a show. I fully expect her to be angry and full of rage and want to take it out on somebody when she gets the opportunity. So it's not a guarantee that she ends up getting the finish, but with women's fights, we get such good money. We get such good numbers on the finish props because they just don't happen very often, and especially the TKOs. Everyone expects the submissions, but no one really expects the TKO. So I think we're going to have an opportunity for her to actually end up getting a finish here. And regardless of whether or not it happens, I'm probably betting it. And I don't know if Nicco Montaño is necessarily parlay material, but I might end up throwing her in a parlay because I really think she rolls here.
Yeah, understandable. I think I mean, if this fight goes according to plan, she is absolutely should be the favorite in this fight. So.
All right. I like that we agree on that one for sure. Okay. Next up, we've got closing out the early card, the early prelims portion of the evening. Niklas Stolze taking on Mounir Lazzez. And James, my ass still hurts from the bomb I lost on Mounir Lazzez. I led the charge his last time out. He opened up at like minus 125, and I steamed him. Every opportunity I had to bet this guy, probably the biggest single bet I've ever made in my entire lifetime as a sports bettor, was on Mounir Lazzez. And we know that if Alves is going to win a fight, if he's going to win it, it's going to be in the first round. We knew that. And in his very next fight, he showed us exactly who he was. And once again, he didn't get it done in the first round, so he got taken out in the second. So it still pains me. Absolutely pains me. But regardless, we know how good this guy is. Mounir Lazzez got caught in the first round, and this is MMA. It happens. You know what I mean? Absolutely happens. So I still am high on Mounir Lazzez, and I still expect big things from him. He's an incredible striker. He's elusive. He's got a solid chin, heavy hands, good gas tank, 2-inch reach advantage here, and he's a flowy striker. He's one of these guys that gets into the groove and has no problem playing chess with people on the feet. And honestly, James, that's exactly what I think this is going to be. I think this will be a chess match. Niklas Stolze, he's over there at Syndicate MMA as well. He's got a tough UFC debut on his hands in Ramazan Ameev, and he looked very, very good in that fight. There's no question in my mind whether or not Niklas Stolze belongs in the UFC. I feel like he's already proven that he absolutely can swim with the sharks here. Big body kicks. He likes to attack that low calf. He always looks for big power knees, attacks the body, aggressive BJJ off of his back. He does jump the ghillie. He's got a tendency to look for that guillotine and has no problem jumping for it, but ends up on bottom because of it sometimes. I don't think that'll be an issue here. Neither of these guys are really offensive wrestler or grappler types. I think we're going to get a striking chess match here. I'm going to pick Mounir Lazzez to win this fight, but at minus 200, I think that's just a little bit much. As much as I'm a fan of Mounir Lazzez, as much as I like the guy and I think he's got a bright future, I don't think there's any value on a minus 200 line. Stolze at plus 170 on the other side of this thing, I think any value at all is going to be on the underdog there. I am not betting this fight. I know that's going to surprise a lot of people because, like I said, I've been shouting Mounir Lazzez from the rooftops since he got to the UFC, but I can't lay 200 on him here. I think this is going to be a close competitive fight, James.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Literally, you pretty much called this to a T, kind of how I did as well. I was so disappointed in that last fight that it's like, now I'm kind of like not as confident with him going forward. And I do like Stolze being at Syndicate as well. That was something I was hearing, just talking to some other, there's like a ton of people. That camp, I don't know what's going on, but there's a lot of people training there right now. Michael Chiesa is there. Aaron Jeffrey is going to be on Contender Series is there as well. There's just a lot of bodies in that gym right now. They seem to be all flowing, but on paper, like my mind tells me Lazzez should win this, but I don't know. There is a bit of pause, like I said, from the last fight as well. I'm going to pick him, but the line's way too high. If he was minus 150, it'd be a different story, but I'm not going to lay down, what is he? Minus 210 right now. I don't know. Seems like too much here. So yeah, I'll pick him, but no bet for me in this fight.
Yeah. I think that's the way to go, man. I wouldn't usually I'd say violence, because these guys are both so skilled. But like I said, I actually would be leaning more towards the over. I think it's going to be a competitive 3-rounder. I think these guys are going to play with each other, try and figure each other out. They're both defensively capable and sound. So I think we're going to see a decision, and I wouldn't be surprised one bit if this was a close one.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So glad we agree there. We're going to go ahead and pick Mounir Lazzez, but the value is probably on his opponent, Niklas Stolze. We're moving over to the main card, everybody. We are kicking off the main card of UFC Vegas 33. We've got 248 live viewers with us in the chat right now. Thank each and every one of you for being there. Do me a favor and smash the like button for us. It really helps out, lets everybody know. And it also helps us continue making this free content and bringing it to you every single day of the week. Make sure you follow my guy, James Lynch, on Twitter and on YouTube as well. Oh, boy, James. Kicking off the main card is Bryan Barberena taking on Jason Witt. Bryan is 15-7, a UFC staple at this point, been around for a long time. Jason Witt is 18-7, rather new to the UFC, but already really struggling, probably fighting for his job here in this spot. Barberena is a big favorite, minus 250 with the underdog, plus 200 on Jason Witt. And this is a spot where it's got to be favored or pass, James. You cannot bet Jason Witt after seeing him his last couple fights. He's supposedly a good, solid offensive grappler, good wrestler, good submission fighter, decent ground and pound, but he has no chin. Malcolm Gordon has a better chin than Jason Witt does. This guy got knocked out by a jab his last time out in 16 seconds. I mean, just... you touch him with pretty much anything and he will fall over clean. Bryan Barberena is a guy who subscribes to the Darren Elkins fighting system. He has no problem getting his ass kicked and taking a beating and then turning the tables on you the deeper the fight goes. He is coming off a bad injury, though. And I feel bad for Bryan Barberena because his last fight, he was coming off of a surgery. So there were big questions about whether or not he could get the thing done last time out. Well, now he had like internal bleeding or something crazy, had a surgery, been sidelined, and now he's back here again. So I absolutely believe that Bryan Barberena, almost in any form, should run through Jason Witt. He's got a good get-up game. Even though he gives up the takedowns and gets put on his ass, he will stand up again and then make you pay for it. So I don't have any faith that Jason Witt can keep this guy down. Once Bryan Barberena gets up and starts punching Witt in the face, I expect him to fall over. But the wear and tear on Barberena's body, he's been in so many battles. He's been knocked out so many times. Now back-to-back surgeries. At a certain point, the body can only take so much, man. I have a very eerie feeling about this fight because, like I said, Barberena in any form should run through Jason Witt. But, man, if it's just one too many accidents, if it's just one too many surgeries, we may be seeing a shell of Bryan Barberena, and I don't want to lay minus 250 in that position. How do you feel about this fight playing out?
Exact same way. I interviewed both guys before the fight. I did hear that story from Barberena. Do you know he almost died? So what he told me basically was he had the internal bleeding. He was with his wife. His wife had to drive him to the hospital. So I guess he was doing camp out away. I think he was doing camp in South Carolina with Joe Selecki and those guys over there. And he was on his way home and he started feeling bad. And his wife was in the car with him. She actually drove him to the hospital. Like, had he not done that, he could have died. So wow. I know when I asked him about his fight future, he was kind of like, well, we're going to sort of gauge it with this fight. That's a big red flag. It really is. Like, you don't even know if you should be fighting. You have a family. You have all these other things. That is a huge red flag. And you know, I like the honesty, and I like the fact that he's, you know, he wants to see what's happening. And I believe doctors have also said, like, dude, you probably shouldn't be fighting. So there's that in the back of your head. Like, on paper, you're 100% right here. He should run through Jason Witt, but how's he going to look after all these surgeries, all these injuries? You know, he's getting up there in age. He's I think only 33, but he's 32, but he's probably like 40 in fight years if you're looking
his
at
body's 83.
Exactly. So it sort of adds up a little bit. Another interesting thing about this fight, Jason Witt went and got tested by the PI. And according to him, and you can watch the interview, it's on my playlist, he claims that, and I'm not saying this because he's lying, I'm just saying that this is what he said. Apparently, he has the highest stress levels out of any fighter in the UFC roster. That's what the PI told him. So he had to change a bunch of things. I guess because he runs a gym. He has all these things going on. I guess he wasn't sleeping properly. They fixed all that. So I don't know if that's going to help his chin per se, because again, Matthew Semelsberger, not exactly known as a knockout artist, so to speak. You know, it's a bit concerning there, but I do think Witt will look better since some of these changes he's made and some of the things that he's identified here. But to me, this is a Barberena inside the distance or pass, in my opinion. Again, 5 dimes, for whatever reason, has this as plus money for Bryan Barberena inside the distance. So you might want to take a look at that if you're going to look at this, but I'm not going to bet Barberena straight up. I don't even want to put him in a parlay because I think there's too many red flags there with the injury history. So I think Barberena most likely will win this fight by knockout, first or second round. But it's just, this is again another fight where, and I know people hate hearing this, but it's just, there's too many factors going into this fight that makes me sort of scare away from like a legit straight bet on Bryan Barberena.
I completely agree, James. And that's where I was absolutely, my very first thought was when I locked up Rafa Garcia. I was like, I'm going to parlay him with Bryan Barberena. I was like, blindly, I'm not even going to look at it. And then I went, let's think about this. And then I looked at his Instagram and I saw the post about the surgery. And then I went back and that kind of was like, okay, that's why I'm just hammering Rafa Garcia. That's why I'm not parlaying him with anybody, because this is a big ask, and that is a big price tag for a guy who has those kinds of issues. And James, if Jason Witt is at all right, I mean, he's speaking from his perspective. He's telling you what the doctors told him. If he changes some of these things around, maybe he looks better. Maybe he actually does have his stress levels fixed, and because of that is able to put on a better performance. Maybe he gets out there and really shocks everybody with how well he's able to grapple. And if he can hold Bryan Barberena down, there's a chance he extends this fight and maybe steals a decision or something from a potentially old and busted Bryan Barberena. This is the most questionable spot on the week, in my opinion, as far as what could potentially happen in this fight. So yeah, I'm not parlaying Bryan Barberena. I'd be looking at the under 2.5. That's at about minus 160, minus 140. It looks like the two places that have it open. Again, not a lot of us have access to that total. I expect violence in this spot. I do expect Bryan Barberena to be the one doing the knocking out. But again, if he's at all a shell of himself, then we've got the opportunity for Witt, because he can crack. Witt's got big punches. He can grapple. This guy's got good chokes on him. So there's definitely an opportunity for violence here in this fight. I'm going to say Bryan Barberena. I'm going to say Bryan by knockout. Man, if I can get plus 100 on Bryan by knockout, I'll bet that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the way to look. And you know what, James? I might do another one of my infamous round 3 sprinkles on Bryan Barberena, because if Witt is able to do anything in this fight and extend it, I would expect, Bryan Barberena to go ham late in the fight and maybe look for that opportunity then. So that might be the angle I kind of take at it.
Good play there. Yeah, I would agree with that.
We'll see what kind of number they give me. Next fight up is unfortunately canceled, everybody. For those of you who missed it a little bit earlier in the show, it looks like Sam Alvey, Roman Hopilov is not happening this weekend. Word on the street is they are trying to find a new opponent for my guy Smiling Sam Alvey. So I hope they give him another opponent. I hope they give him a new opportunity. But that's it for this one. So we'll see what ends up happening there. Obviously, if he does get an opponent, I'll mention the breakdown a little bit in one of my videos a little bit later this week. So the actual next fight is Kyung-ho Kang taking on Ronnie Yaya. And we've got Kang, who is Mr. Perfect, 17-8, taking on one of the, he's nearing legend status, right, James? Like, he's got to be getting close. 27-10, Ronnie Yaya, a guy that's just been around in the game absolutely forever. Kang had a 2-year layoff. It's so weird for me. This guy did his country mandated service before his last fight and had a really long layoff for that one. Comes out, gets a close split decision win, and then disappears for another 2 years. Now, I'm assuming it was because of COVID. We're seeing a lot of people having trouble, traveling and things like that in this climate. So can't really hold it against him. But he just hasn't fought hardly at all recently because of what's been going on with him. And he is, let's see here. He's always in a close fight. That's the biggest thing I can tell you about Kyung-ho Kang. He's well-rounded, good grappling, physically strong. They call him Mr. Perfect, I think, because of the way he looks. He's got phenomenal genetics that most of us would kill for, but he slows down late. That's something I've noticed in his fight, James. He always seems to tire in the third round, and he's not exceptional anywhere. He's a decent grappler. He's a decent striker, but he doesn't blow the brakes off of me in any aspect of this game. He's going to have a 6-inch reach advantage in this spot, though, over Ronnie Yaya, who we should all know extremely well by now. This guy wings power bombs. He tries to close the range, corral his opponents, and then he chain grapples them to the mat where he goes to work with his BJJ. high-level BJJ, strong wrestler, little tank of a man, and I doubted him in his last fight, and he absolutely proved me wrong there. So I'm back on the Ronnie Yaya train, James. I can't doubt this guy because even though he's getting a little bit older, he's like Damian Maia. He just keeps doing the damn thing. And Kyung-ho Kang is a guy, both these guys actually, neither of them have actually beaten a UFC opponent with a winning record. So still scraping the bottom of the barrel all the way up at the end of the main card here on Saturday. Yikes, James, I can't imagine laying chalk on Kyung-ho Kang in this spot. He's a slight favorite, minus 145. The comeback is plus 120 on Ronnie Yaya. And this is dog or pass for me, James. I don't know. I don't know how this fight's going to play out at all. Because if Kyung-ho Kang goes for the grappling, that's playing right into the hands of Ronnie Yaya. So he may end up trying to keep it on the feet. He may try to stick and move and use his range. But Ronnie's been known to close the distance and land bombs when that happens, and you cannot slow down against Ronnie. I know a lot of people have talked about the bad gas tank of Ronnie Yaya. What about the bad gas tank of Kyung-ho Kang? Because if you get tired, Ronnie will snap your neck. So, again, dog or pass for me. How do you feel about this one, James?
I think if you think that Ronnie Yaya can submit Kang, then obviously he's the guy to go with. I just don't know if that happens. You look at a lot of Yaya's fights, it's literally that where like Luke Sanders, I know that fight's a couple of years ago, but I remember that was a fight that Sanders was actually looking good in early on, and then he made a mistake and Yaya capitalized. I don't think Kang's that guy. I don't think he's a guy like you look, he's been submitted once in his career. It was years ago. He's not the type of guy to let Ronnie Yaya take advantage of that, and I think he knows the threat he possesses. I think this fight's going to stay standing. I think Kang's going to get the better of him, and he's going to win one of those close fights again. I just can't bet on Ronnie Yaya at this point because at some point, like he hasn't wowed me. You know what I mean? Like there's fights where he wins. Like even Ray Rodriguez. How many times has Ray Rodriguez been submitted in his career? Plenty. So I mean, that was always a path to victory for him in that fight. With Kang, not so much. This is not a guy who's known for getting submitted. In fact, he's got a couple submission wins on his resume. I remember he submitted Ishihara, right? If you remember back in 2019. So I think Kang wins. Another iffy fight here, but I just, to me at this point, Yaya is just not getting it done, so to speak. So I think Kang, despite the layoff, I think he's going to actually look a little bit better in this one. I think the time off might have helped him out a little bit, and I think he goes out there and puts on a really good performance, but a decisive win in the case of a decision. I think he gets it done or potentially a knockout, but more likely a decision, I think, in this fight. Okay. We're on opposite sides here again, and that's perfectly fine because I expect my money to be nowhere near this one, James. I'm not planning on betting on this one. I will cheer for Ronnie Yaya. I always love when the old guys get one over. He can submit anybody. That's all it comes down to is Ronnie Yaya can submit literally anybody. But you're right. The youth, the height, the size, like that all favors for Kang. And man, the problem is his level of competition has been so awful. You mentioned the Teruto Ishihara. What a layup that was, though. Like we know that name. He's a legend. He wasn't that guy when Kyung-ho Kang fought him. So yikes, man. Yeah, it's going to be close. And I would caution anybody from playing this fight because Kyung-ho Kang goes to split decision a lot. Like if you look at his record, it's split. This fight is going to be close if nobody finishes it. So even if you end up on the winning side, I just don't think you're going to feel good about your ticket, no matter which side of it you're on. Yeah, no, well said. It's again, there's a lot of tricky fights on this card. It's not like we're trying to, be lazy with the analysis. It's just like there's so many spots on a lot of these fights that it's like it kind of makes you stay away a little bit. So that's just one thing to keep in mind with this fight. Yeah, no, this honestly, James, we've talked about it a couple times, but this card really seems like one of the leftovers, right? Like when they're these people have contracts, they need fights. We're not that excited about them. Pair them up and toss them all on one card together. We'll give it's a freebie. We'll just get it away for the weekend. That really is what this feels like. A lot of sink or swim spots, a lot of people fighting for their futures, for their careers, for their jobs, people that may not belong in the UFC. Like that's what we're dealing with for this weekend. So, if you can spot the right spots, some interesting opportunities for value, but the rest of the time it's a minefield. So be careful out there, folks. Next up, speaking of minefields, Cheyenne Buys taking on Gloria De Paula. Now, I find it interesting because both these women are coming off of a loss, and they are somehow higher on the card than Jinh Frey, who beat Gloria De Paula in her last fight, and Ashley Yoder, who is a mainstay in the UFC. They're still going to be ranked higher than them as far as the televised portion of the fights go. So that's a little fun. But this is a battle of the busted prospects here, James. Both these women had a lot of hype on them coming off of the Dana White Contender Series, and they both immediately shit the bed. Buys
She's 5-2, Paula 5-3, and we all remember the buys situation. It was the first time man and wife couple had ever been paired on the UFC card together, training partners, all that kind of, and they both lost. They were both massive favorites, and they both got destroyed in the same night. And how James is Cheyenne Buys a favorite again? I mean, I haven't even gotten to the breakdown talking about the skill sets or anything like that, but after her last performance, getting headlocked for 15 minutes, which is not an overly successful move in the world of MMA, she still rolls in as a minus 200 favorite here over Gloria DePaula. I'm floored, James. What's up with that?
This reminds me of Miranda Maverick and Macy Barber last week, right? Like they have two prospects. I think in the case of both these fighters, let's call it what it is, they're very easy to market, if you know what I'm saying. So I think that's why they're trying to figure out who the better prospect is. And I know they're very high on Baze. Remember, Baze used to be managed by Misha Tate. So there's always been sort of this hype with her. And I think that's part of the reason, I don't know if you know, for this camp, she left Fortis MMA. She's back at Extreme Couture. So that's something as well that I think the UFC, I sort of get the sense they're very high in Cheyenne. But just in case they aren't, they like this Gloria DePaula girl as well, who, again, very marketable and got a nice win on Contender Series last year as well. But totally, like, how do you lose to Jinh Frey? That was, to me, a fight that, again, kind of like the Buys fight that, you should have won. So to me, they're trying to figure out who the better prospect is. I think they're just throwing the women out here because whoever wins, they're going to push that fighter, kind of like they were going to push Miranda, I think, had she beat Macy in that fight as well. I think they still will, but you kind of get where I'm going with here. But this is another fight where it's like, I don't know how anyone feels super confident. Like, I know you're talking about Buys not being that great. I don't think DePaula is anything to write home about either. Even if you look prior to her getting in the UFC, just not a lot of great competition here. I mean, the girl, she lost to Carasoli in her second pro fight. She had that tough fight with DePaula, Isabella DePaula on the regional scene as well. So I don't know what you're getting with either fighter, and I don't even know who has the better camp. I mean, DePaula is coming from, Shootbox with the Diego Lima camp, not the Diego Lima at American Top Team. And then Baze comes from Extreme Couture. So you'd think Baze has a lot of training partners. So this is just a big iffy fight for me. I went with Baze on my show. That's kind of where I'm going to go here. I don't think Gloria DePaula is as good as people think she is either. So I take the over. That's all I'm saying. Take the over in this fight and hope for the best. And that's how I'm kind of looking at this fight.
I mean, I don't hate it. The only problem is I doubt you're getting much of a line on that. So we've got, Cheyenne Buys is minus 200, plus 160, plus 155 coming back the other way. The over 2.5 is minus 300. So yeah, you've got to eat some serious chalk.
So, I mean, you could parlay it or something, but even then, I don't even think it's worth it if it's minus 300, right? I think most people know that's probably going to go the distance.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly, I think this is a dog or pass spot, James. I don't know how you could bet this besides like what you're saying, just eating the chalk on this thing, because never am I trusting Cheyenne Buys until she actually shows me something new at minus 200. I mean, she, like you mentioned, she moved back to Extreme Couture, so that could end up being a good thing. Maybe she's more comfortable there. Maybe the coaches know her there better. Maybe she has a better game plan. But she's supposed to be a good grappler, and that was embarrassing what Montserrat Ruiz did to her. She is willing to grind people up against the cage, so I could see her slowing this thing down. She's got a stiff jab. She's always trying to move forward. But Gloria DePaula, she's a classic Muay Thai striker, man. She's very slick on her feet. Nice low kicks. Good range management, a nice 1-2, and she flips a head kick up there like it's nothing. Big, powerful clinch knees, so if Cheyenne Buys gets in close trying to look for that control up against the fence, she's going to be eating those power knees from Gloria DePaula. The issue for me is that even though Buys was embarrassing in her last fight, Gloria DePaula just got ground out by Jinh Frey. This was the win that I was talking about when I say Jinh Frey saved her job. So we can't trust her to get up out from under Jinh Frey, who's on the chopping block in the UFC. A younger, potentially more powerful wrestler in Cheyenne Buys probably has no problem holding her down there either. So even though Gloria DePaula is going to have a 2-inch height advantage and a 4-inch reach advantage, I think that says something. Even though in the clinch, I think she's better. She's by far the better striker. The fact that she could get put on her back and just get put away for 15 minutes here, I have such a hard time lining up behind her there. I think the line is way too wide. If we were simply sniping value, which, hey, I hit Paiva last week by doing that exact thing. I feel like the line is too wide. I put a bet on it. Let's see what the hell happens. I'd be looking here at Gloria DePaula because this should probably be closer to a pick'em. But I don't know if I'm going to be able to stomach betting this one whatsoever, James.
Totally understand. By the way, Sam Alvey moved to the August 28th card. News just broke right now. So he's off this card.
Okay. Did they get him rescheduled?
No opponent announced yet. They just said August 28th TBA. It will be at middleweight.
Damn. Okay. Well, once again, I feel for my guy Sam Alvey. Please, UFC, just give the guy a cupcake. Don't try to build a name off of Sam Alvey for just one fight. Give the guy a decent fight so he can get an opportunity there. My boy Danny Betts back to the action here. Cheyenne buys, and Gloria de Paula has fireball and popcorn written all over it. Could not agree more, my guy. All right. We're almost wrapped up here, folks. We're moving through this card. It's co-main event time. Shamil Abdurakhimov taking on Chris Daukaus. What a fight. Heavyweight match here, one that we were excited about a week ago. One of Shamil's cornermen popped for COVID, so they had to push it back a week. And honestly, on a fight card like this one, I love that we're getting this fight because it's a refreshing treat to have a legitimate fight on this card with all the other garbage that we kind of have to sift through here on this one. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm the biggest fan of watching and betting low-level MMA, so I don't mean to be too disparaging because, like I said, there's good money to be had, and there's usually finishes. So it's always a fun fight card when you get these type of cards. But you do need that little sprinkling of some substance, and that's what we've got here in the co-main event. Shamil Abdurakhimov is 20-5. Daukaus is 11-3. And this is new school versus old school, James. Shamil is not a bad fighter. He's another one of these guys that's been laid off for COVID. He hasn't fought since 2019, but he's almost 40. He's 39 years old, and that's the magic number, folks. Remember, here on this podcast, we don't bet on fighters that are 40 years or over unless we have a damn good reason to do so. And he's not 40 yet, but I also don't have a damn good reason. Shamil is heavy on his feet. This is a guy that can wing big power hooks, big overhand bombs. He's got sneaky uppercuts, and he's a strong wrestler. It's surprising how good this guy is on the ground. Honestly, the well-rounded MMA game of Shamil, it's surprising when you dig into the tape and you see what he's capable of. This guy's been overlooked a lot in his career. Kind of reminds me of a Glover Teixeira. If we could rewind the clock, make him 34 again, this guy would be a problem if he had some more years to move. Chris Daukaus on the other side of this thing, he's my boy. Absolutely love Chris Daukaus. There's the Daukaus brothers. Chris is the A-side Daukaus brother. Came in the UFC, overweight, flabby, having a hard time, has absolutely transformed himself, taken his strength and conditioning seriously, really working on becoming an actual athlete. He's got fast, heavy hands. He's a BJJ black belt, and that's something a lot of people are questioning what it looks like on the ground. We haven't really seen Daukaus on the mat, but he's a black belt, so I have no question that once it gets down to the floor, we're probably going to see something good. And all I can say about this fight, James, is speed kills, man. Shamil is a big, slow-moving iceberg of a man, and Daukaus is so fast at heavyweight. He reminds me of Cain Velasquez. When you're just a little bit lighter than your opponents, you're a little bit smaller, and those hands do the talking. He's going to be able to hit Shamil from angles that he just doesn't see coming, and he won't be able to keep up with. My only question is, someone is going to eventually extend Daukaus, and I don't think he's the same fighter that he was when he was really struggling on the regional scene. He's got 2 knockout losses. I think he's moved leaps and bounds since then. I don't think that he's the same guy, but there is a question of what happens when he gets out of round 1. Shamil's the kind of guy that's going to test that. Shamil on the flip side of this thing has been knocked out 3 times already. He's getting older, so that can't get any better. I got to roll with Daukaus, James. He's minus 200 here, plus 160 to come back on Shamil Abdurakhimov. I think it's Daukaus. And once again, I think it's Daukaus by violent, vicious knockout. It's just a matter of when for me. Not sure if I want to load up on the hammer on this one, though, because I don't want to disrespect Shamil, but I really do think Daukaus is the right side here. What do you see this? How do you see this fight playing out?
Yeah, I like Daukaus here as well. Got a chance to speak with him before this. He's slowly tapering off the police thing. That's one thing he didn't mention. He's a full-time police officer. So, once that sort of gets out of, once he eventually sort of moves away from that, he'll be even better. I mean, there's 2 heavyweights right now that I think, there's a couple, but him and Tom Aspinall are 2 of the most exciting heavyweights right now that are on the come up, that have good wins over veterans. So those are guys that I pay attention to. And I like this fight. It's another veteran. They're not, throwing him to the wolves, giving him a Volkov or something like that. They're giving him Shamil. And, to his credit, Shamil's losing to really good guys. I mean, forget about Tim Johnson, but Derek Lewis and Curtis Blades are 2 of the best heavyweights in that division. Also has a win over Marcin Tybura. That win looks really good right now, considering the run that Tybura's been on. One thing we didn't talk about, there's a big layoff coming into this fight for Shamil. He hasn't fought since September of 2019. At his age and having a layoff like that, that's got to impact him a bit, not getting that fight experience. He's had how many fights canceled here? We forget about the other Dawkins fight. He's supposed to fight Augusto Sakai back in May of this year. Sakai was rebooked. He's supposed to fight Cyril Gane twice. It's crazy how that fight could have gone, just with the fact that, Gane's now fighting for an interim heavyweight title. So you do wonder, too, if that's kind of messing with him a little bit as well, having all these camps and not getting to fight. That's got to hurt him as well. But the key thing you touched on there is the speed. I think it is going to stay standing, and I think Dawkins has a clear advantage there. And I think all it's going to take is for him to just touch Shamil at some point and go in for the kill. But the thing I like the most about that interview with Dawkins is that he realizes how dangerous his opponent is. He referenced the losses against really good competition, better competition than Chris Dawkins has fought. So he's very well prepared in this one. And I think even if it does go to the ground, this is a Martinez BJJ guy. He's a guy that comes from a jiu-jitsu gym. He'll be fine on the ground. So I think Dawkins is going to be trouble for a lot of people. I think until he fights like a Volkov or like a, Blades or someone like that, that's where we would have to take a little bit of a deeper dive here. But he should beat someone like this. This almost does seem like a fight where he could lose, and maybe it's a case of us putting too many eggs in one basket. But I think Chris is going to go out there and knock him out. I'd be pretty surprised if he doesn't. And I think it would be sort of on his end if he didn't perform. But everything we've seen so far leads to me believing that Chris Dawkins is going to get the knockout. I would start looking at the round props, 1, 2, something like that. This guy does not like getting paid by the hour. So I would look at those types of props as well. Maybe look at the knockout prop as well. But I don't think this fight's going the distance. I think Chris Dawkins gets a second round knockout in this fight.
I like it, James, and I love what you mentioned there, man. The fact that Dawkins is more than willing to face, those facts and think about his opponent and how dangerous he is. I love thinking fighters. When you get somebody who operates at a high level up here, that makes all the difference for me in the cage. So a little bit of my fears alleviated there. I think you're right. I think violence, again, may be the way to go here on this fight because you'll get a better price tag than just betting Dawkins straight. And if things go the wrong way, Shamil can fire some heavy hands too. So there's a chance if Shamil pulls the upset, he probably just ends up finishing Dawkins on the flip side of this thing. So maybe another violence bet for me.
Yeah, we'll see. It's gonna be a great fight.
Oh, it's gonna be so fun. I can't wait for that one. I was so pissed off when it got pushed a week because this is I'm a big fan of Dawkins, and this is that moment where we see whether or not he can swim with the big boys. So I can't wait. I'm super excited to see this one. All right, folks, it's that time. It's time to break down the main event of UFC Vegas 33. But first, a word from our sponsors. Main event time, everybody. We've got Uriah Hall taking on Sean Strickland. Uriah Hall 18-9, Strickland 23-3. And what we have is Hall is a plus 175 underdog. The favorite, Sean Strickland, minus 225. And you know what? I have seen nothing but love for Uriah Hall online, James. This is maybe the weirdest, most backward spot to me that I've ever seen because everybody has been just shitting on Uriah Hall for the last 4 years of his career. I have been not so quietly cashing tickets with him in his last several fights and talking about how much I love this guy. He's got the KO power. He's got that fast twitch muscle. He's explosive. And here we find ourselves again with a plus 175 line, and all I can hear about is how wide this line is and how so many people lining up behind Uriah Hall because he should be a pick'em here. He should be the favorite here. I think the market's got it backwards, James. I think we have finally reached critical mass, and I know there's going to be a lot of people in the chat right now that get mad at me because I think this line is not only the right way, but I think it needs to be wider. I think Sean Strickland is going to surprise a lot of people on Saturday, James. We have got a situation where, and again, I don't mean to insult anybody or anything like that, but the casual viewership has finally moved over to Uriah Hall. But I want to talk to you about his recent run, all right? He was on the chopping block. He was about to get booted from the UFC. And then they give him Bevon Lewis. In fact, he was an underdog to Bevon Lewis. He was a plus 200 underdog to Bevon Lewis. And he was losing that fight, James. I bet on
Came back
Uriah
in the third
Hall.
round. I remember that fight. Yep.
I bet Uriah Hall in that spot, and I got so much shit for that pick. He came back with a third-round knockout over Bevon Lewis. And what's happened to Bevon since then? He's not with the promotion anymore, James. They booted that kid out of there because he was an absolute busted prospect, and Uriah Hall started that skid for him. His next fight was a split decision win over Antonio Carlos Jr., where once again I backed him as an underdog, and people screamed robbery after that fight because if you remember, he got backpacked for the entire third round, and the judges gave it to him on a very, very controversial decision because he was still striking Antonio Carlos Jr. while he had the back control position. ACJ, even though he's left the organization, has moved up to 205 and is looking like a machine outside the UFC to this point. So a very close, razor-thin win that very likely could have gone the other way if we had a different judge behind the desk. Then they give him Anderson Silva. It's the big matchup of these are the two savviest strikers in the UFC, the best matchup we've ever seen. And again, I was heavy on Uriah Hall by knockout, James, because it was a 5-round main event, and facing a slower, old, and busted Anderson Silva, I knew eventually the man was going to slow down, and eventually Uriah Hall was going to have his opportunity to capitalize on the legend slowing down. Sure enough, he is losing that fight. He's given away 3 rounds to Anderson Silva, and in the 4th, he knocks out the legend. Then what happens in his last fight? Uriah Hall doesn't throw a single punch, James. Chris Weidman breaks his own leg off on the shin of Uriah Hall. Hall didn't do a damn thing. We didn't have the opportunity to see how that fight would play out. It's a broken legend in Chris Weidman. It's a broken legend in Anderson Silva. It's a split over a guy who's not with the organization, and it's a comeback KO over a busted prospect who is no longer with the UFC. Guys, Uriah Hall is not the guy that we all thought he was, and now he's getting older. He is knockout or bust to the highest level. And Sean Strickland is better than Uriah Hall everywhere. This is a 5-round main event. So yes, he's going to have 5 full rounds to find that perfect sniper shot, to land that spinning heel kick. And he could do it. He could. But if he doesn't find that perfect opportunity with a guy like Sean Strickland, who has such insane pace and volume and is constantly in your face, Uriah Hall's not going to have room to spin, James. Sean Strickland is going to be in his face throwing combinations the entire fight. And then what happens if Uriah Hall gets close to clipping him? We forget that Sean Strickland is incredible on the ground. He doesn't shoot a lot of takedowns. He's not a big wrestler, but his jiu-jitsu is off the charts. And he's got a 60% takedown accuracy. So if he wants this thing to the ground, it's going to the ground. He's only been knocked out once his entire career. I think Sean Strickland is going to embarrass Uriah Hall on Saturday, James, and I am not sure how I'm playing it yet, but I might be loading up on Sean Strickland here.
I like Sean Strickland as well. By the way, I'm pretty sure I'm the only person who got an interview with him prior to fight week. So you go check that out on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/LynchOnSports. You'll see it there in the UFC Vegas 32 playlist. A lot of good tidbits in that interview. So I didn't know, I kind of figured this was the case, but I didn't realize they've trained together in the past, him and Uriah. And granted, it was years ago. They first trained together at Rain back when Mark Munoz was running that gym. So they were there in California together. Also trained a bit at Extreme Couture. In fact, Sean Strickland's one of the few fighters across the board who is allowed to train at both Syndicate MMA and Extreme Couture. Those are rival gyms, but they both coaches are cool enough, John Wood and Eric Nixick, of letting Sean train there. So I think that speaks volumes of what type of training partner Sean is, because he's going to bring it to you. Everyone I've talked to, they don't like sparring Sean because he's an intense guy. Kind of the same thing I've heard of Uriah as well. And actually it was funny when I brought up Uriah and talked about the past training, he said, Uriah was a dick to train with. He would go full force, but Sean Strickland's not the guy to do that with. He's the guy that will also get in your face. And the whole viral video with Orlando Sanchez and all that stuff. But, he's a guy that will bring 110%. But I didn't realize how many places Sean Strickland trains. It's everywhere. He spent some time with Marvin Vettori this camp. I think that's great. He's getting a bunch of different looks in terms of the different style of matchup. Now, saying that, I think Uriah Hall is at the best camp he could possibly be at Fortis MMA, because you know what? He's got structure there. Saif Saud runs a very tight ship there. You can't pull any bullshit. You can't try and be the man there. It's a team effort. Saif's not going to put up with that. And you've seen the improvements he's made since going there. And I wish we would have got to see the Weidman fight, because I do think he would have looked a little bit better in that fight. But Sean Strickland has looked amazing. You know what I always go back to, Clint, is the Robert Whittaker fight with Uriah Hall. Why did Robert win that fight? He won that fight because he got in Uriah's face and took him out of his element. That's exactly what Sean Strickland does. You watch the Brendan Allen fight. Look at Brendan Allen just won on the weekend. I know it was a bit of a comeback, but still, that was a good win that he got on the weekend. Sean Strickland got in his face and made Brendan Allen look like an absolute amateur. I've been following Brendan's career for a while. I've never seen him get that dominated in a fight to the point of where he got finished in that fight. Sean Strickland steamrolled him. I would have liked a better effort against Jocko in Strickland's last fight, but I think you know what Sean Strickland is capable of, as we saw in the Brendan Allen fight, and I think that's what's going to happen here. I think he's going to get in Uriah's face. Uriah's not going to be able to unload and get off, and it's going to be one of those fights where Uriah's going to get frustrated and he's going to make a mistake, and that's where Strickland gets the finish. I really believe that Strickland's going to go out there and put on the type of performance that people are going to start talking about him being a title contender after the type of performance he has on Saturday night, because I really think that the UFC is starting to realize this is a guy who should have fought at middleweight a while ago, and you look at the run he's been on, he's not just fighting guys, he's dominating in a lot of cases, and I think we're going to see that on Saturday night here. So when you said that about going heavy on Strickland, my ears kind of perked up, because I sort of feel the same way here. As veteran savvy as Uriah Hall is, he's so inconsistent, and I don't know how any Hall backer in this case feels that he could go out there and perhaps turn back the clock. Look, he's got good wins. I'm the biggest Gegard Mousasi fan out there. He knocked out Gegard Mousasi the night of my wedding. It almost ruined my wedding because someone had texted me. I was trying to avoid spoilers, and here he was beating him. But what happened in the rematch? Gegard went out there and took care of business. So as great as Uriah is in terms of the competition he's fought, and he's got some good wins, he's just so inconsistent. And right now, Strickland's got a little momentum. I think he shows that here on Saturday and puts away Uriah Hall. 3rd or 4th round finish. I think it'll be a little bit later, but I think Strickland gets it done.
I'm really glad that we agree here, James. I think that this is a great spot for Strickland. And if we want to talk about just one more thing that he's got an edge in, let's talk durability. People forget that Uriah Hall's been knocked out 4 times. 4 times this dude's been cracked, and it was by Derek Brunson, Gegard Mousasi, Paulo Costa, and then it looks like the last one was pretty far back on his record, but it was Chris Wyman on the regional scene. So, I mean, that chin has been cracked a bunch of times. We've seen him wobble a couple of times before, and it's been a long time since anybody got in his face. Everybody's been looking to play chess with him. Everybody's been looking to grapple with him. Nobody's really gotten dirty in his face recently, and that's exactly what Strickland is going to do. I think you nailed it. I think it's a 3rd or 4th round finish, and I will be sprinkling those championship round 3, 4, and 5 props for Sean Strickland, because I think he breaks Uriah Hall on Saturday. And I may parlay Strickland. I may lay the hammer on him as well. I'm not sure yet. It's always a bit scary because Uriah Hall always has the chance to go nuclear, James. He could pull a spinning back kick out and clip him on the back of the head or right behind the ear and put him away. But I think that's one of those things where in this particular case, it's relatively low percentage that happens. I think I ride with the favorite and just hold my nose and hope Uriah doesn't go off again.
Yeah, I mean, this looks like a spot where Strickland should shine, but we'll see. I mean, anything can happen in a fight, but I do feel like Strickland, this is his time to go out there and perform very well. And they're both like kind of crazy, like in a good way. Like they're both guys that are just a little bit off their, like you'll see if you watch the interview with Strickland, you'll see what I mean. He's very much like speaks his mind. I had that clip I posted up, which I didn't think would get that much attention, but he just absolutely trashed Sean O'Malley. Like, I don't know if you saw that clip or not, talking about his tattoo and just like, he's a character, man, like underrated interview too. So yeah, again, I'm not being biased here. I actually did try and interview Uriah, but apparently he's, sort of stayed off media for this camp. I think he'll do like the fight week stuff, but I was told that he's not doing any interviews outside of the regular media stuff. So take that for what it's worth. But yeah, I really like Sean Strickland in the spot.
Okay. Hey, note to anybody out there, if you're trying to produce content, you blow up if you throw shade at Sean O'Malley. I figured that out. On TikTok. I made a TikTok where I kind of poked a jab at Sean O'Malley and it blew up. It's by far got the most views out of anything I've ever done. So that's the key to success, is to just crap on Sean O'Malley. Shout out to our guy, Tajik Bey, the GOAT in the house. Thank you very much for the donation, my friend. We always appreciate you being around and hanging out. Thank you for the positivity and being here for the show this evening, Tajik Bey. We appreciate you, bud. One of the family right there. All right, so quick recap. I'm on Philip Rowe, plus 165, 2 units. Trevin Jones, plus 122 units. Danny Chavez for plus 105, just the 1 unit right now. May end up doing kind of like I did with Darren Elkins last week and sprinkling a little bit more on that. And then the 5-unit bomb on Rafa Garcia, 5 units to win 2. Everything else is hanging in the balance. As you all know, follow me at Die Hard MMA Pod on Twitter. I will tweet and post my action as soon as I do make another bet or lock it in. You'll find it there. You can also follow me on Instagram. Smash that like button and subscribe here at Pub Sports Radio. Massive shout out and thank you to my guy, one of my absolute favorite guests, James Lynch. Thank you so much for spending your Monday night with us here, my man. The floor is yours if you want to let the people know where they can find you and how they can support you.
Well, thanks for having me on. I think next year is going to be the year we're finally going to have a beer together. I got to get out to Arizona, one of my favorite places out there. Go see a Coyotes game or something, even though they took half the roster last week with that trade.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, I'm scared about Oliver Ekman-Larsson, by the way. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, @LynchOnSports, YouTube.com/LynchOnSports. I work for a ton of different outlets, 10 outlets, I think, something like that. So I put all the interviews in playlists on my channel. If you guys are looking for UFC Vegas 32 content, I'll just quickly run it over here. Sean Strickland, talk to him, talk to Chris Dawkins, talk to who else on here? Jason Witt, Brian Barberena, Collin Anglin, Chavez, unfortunately didn't see the light of day. And what was the other one? Orion Cosce, talk to him as well. So check that out. Cosce, always butcher it. And thanks for having me on, man. It's always a pleasure.
Love doing it, James. We will get you back around the horn and on the show again as soon as we possibly can. Appreciate you spending the time with us tonight. And I do have to give just one more shout out to my guy, Tajik Bey, the absolute GOAT with the massive $49.99 donation. Thank you, my friend. This goes directly to supporting us here at Pub Sports Radio. Keeps the lights on here. Keeps the content coming to you for free. So Tajik, and James, if you don't know who Tajik is, I think he won $9,000 in DraftKings this past weekend.
I think I saw something about that on social media, yeah.
This is the man right here. Had the 9K,
Enjoy the 9K
winner lineup for the UFC Vegas 32. So absolute master. We appreciate Tajik Bey hanging out with us. Thank you for the donation, my friend. It means a ton. That's it. That's all we got for you, folks. We're going to cut you loose. I don't have a ton of words of wisdom or anything for you today. Tread lightly on UFC Vegas 33. But, of course, as always, I'll be back with the Total Takedown where we go back over the card totals later in the week here, either Wednesday or Thursday. That drops. I'll have an article coming out for Pub Sports Radio. We've got the Friday Undefeated post-weigh-in show. You've got all the other content creators here, the boys at Pub Sports. You know, Jimmy does the show every single day with Ian Cameron, Connor Mack, Razor Sharp Picks. Then, of course, the MMA boys, Danny Betts, Locker Room doing the lunch money, my boy Boston Nick MMA, Billy Bills. We got the whole crew here at Pub keeping you busy with content. And, of course, the live stream on Saturday where we do the bet cast as the fights go on for you. So chill. You want to hang out here at Pub Sports. We're a whole lot of fun. Thank you very much, James. Everybody have a wonderful week. Good luck on all of your degenerate action. And I could use a freaking home run right about now because I've got a bunch of bets on baseball tonight. And so far we're goose eggs. So pray for me. Good luck, everybody. Let's roll.